Good morning, trainers. Hopefully, chat, let me know if you can hear me. I think we're good to go. Hopefully, I can actually see the chat. All right. Let's see. So we've got a decent amount of viewers this morning. So this morning is is definitely going to be a first. So sort of a little anticlimactic, I think, in general, but I think today's Fireside Dev Chat is going to be mostly focused on, I think, what a lot of people are waiting for, which is our upcoming title, World of Kojia. So most of you guys have been playing Genesis, and you probably are aware that we're really focused on building a franchise around the concept of NFTs and NFTs moving from game to game and following you across the ecosystem. Perry, I think I have both. It says that it's a multi-stream chat. I'm not really a streamer. We're doing our best over here. Yeah, I guess it's both. Looks like I have access to both the Twitch and the YouTube chats. So as I was saying, we're came on, and Pink Moon Studios is really focused on building a franchise around the NFT portability concept. And so our sort of focus is really around how do we build multiple games that players can enjoy and play that use the same assets. And so today we will get our first look of actual gameplay on stream of the world of Kojia. So that'll be sort of the main attraction today. We're also going to cover, which I think is going to be a pretty big spoiler because it's been kept under wraps, how the combat system will work in World of Kojia. I know there's been some questions about it. We got a lot of good questions that were sent in, so we'll sort of dive right in and sort of answer those as we go. Right. Let's see here. All right. So, World of Kojia, designed to be a mobile native game or a multi-platform game. Genesis is obviously playable on Android and iOS, and also on WebGL. World of Kojia will not be available on the web simply because the web just can't handle the level of requirements that are needed for it. However, we will be adding PC clients in the future, so the game will basically play cross-platform. Regardless of which platform you're on, you'll be playing with all the same players. So really what we're focusing on is kind of bringing a good gaming experience. There's not a lot of mobile MMOs on the market, not a lot of high-quality ones at least, and so we're sort of looking to bring sort of the world of Kmon across all of your platforms available to you at your fingertips whenever you want. There's a lot of players that we're talking about wanting to play on PC. Obviously, most of your sort of major MMORPGs are played on PC, so we decided to opt for a PC client. Today I'm going to be playing on the PC. We do have some changes upcoming for the PC client. Basically, we'll be adding key bindings and taking away some of the buttons that you see. The game was basically built for mobile initially. So during the community previews that we leaked at the last at the Guild Game Night, the players will basically be playing on Android and iOS. So we've been building mostly on the mobile platforms, but obviously PC will be something that we can support as well. So many of you, this is probably your first look at the gameplay in World of Kojia. You basically play as your trainer, and you have your Cryptomon companions that will basically follow you around. Just a few sort of highlights. A lot of the stuff that you'll see from Genesis, as we talk about different types of assets, things like clothing and cosmetics, which will be coming out in Genesis in the next month or so. And also things like Cryptomon and Cryptomon armor. Those will essentially just carry over with you. So if you win a unique cosmetic, say, a Santa's hat, then you'll be able to wear it in all of our games. Has a basic clothing system. If you play Genesis, you'll be pretty familiar with it. You can basically swap out for different pieces of equipment. As of right now, I think I just have some basic stuff on. We're going to roll barefoot for now and go from there. You also will have access to your Cryptomon. So as I mentioned, our big thing is portability of NFTs. So you invest with us once, buy some high-quality NFTs, and then you'll be able to use them to play across our entire franchise. For the community preview, all of your junior-level Cryptomon and above will basically be available for you to play from production. So you'll be able to kind of get your first look at your Cryptomon from Genesis in 3D. So as you can see, all of our Cryptomon have basically been ported to 3D. You'll notice that some of them have this sparkling aura. Those are the aura unfreezable Cryptomon. So all that stuff carries forward as well. You can swap your different Cryptomon. From a gameplay perspective, you're not going to have access to all of your Cryptomon while you're out exploring the world of Kojia. There's some gameplay mechanics. You'll essentially be able to take a portion of them out with you, depending on your level of progression in the game and different things that you've earned. You can unlock different slots so that way you can have additional Cryptomon that are available to you out while you're playing. One of the cool features of the game is that there's a lot of tie-ins to the elements. So there are some things in the open world that you can and can't do without certain elements. So players will want to kind of carry a bunch of different elements that they have access to. One of the other nice things, for those of you who probably are concerned that I don't have all of the elements, World of Kojia will feature a party system. So you'll be able to group up with your friends and play. And you'll be able to leverage their elements as well. So if you're working on a quest or something, or trying to open something, and you don't have access to that element, you can party up with a friend, and your friend will be able to kind of help you out with your quest. So this gameplay is really focused along sort of open world gameplay, collaborations with friends, different types of things that sort of creates more of a social dynamic. So there's going to be a lot of sort of player interaction, player collaboration. Obviously, guilds and things will be super important. Someone's obviously following me around. Figured that was going to happen. What's up, Drew Candy? So, as you probably see, there are other players in the world. I don't remember who this is. I apologize. I don't know everyone's in-game name. But basically, this is production. It's a MMORPG. Right now, basically, whoever this is playing literally somewhere across the world, and we're just hanging out together. So basically, that's sort of a good segue. Our goal with this game is to really create like a true sort of metaverse. I know that word is a little bit sort of loaded, but create this sort of open world feeling and concept where essentially you can come and be part of the world of Kojia. And interact with other players, and essentially sort of take part in building this world out. The goal for us is basically to have essentially a small number of servers so that there's lots of players always playing at a time. We will most likely have regional clusters, so if you're an APAC player and you need sort of better performance and ping, we will eventually have servers in the specific regions around the world. We'll probably have one in Asia Pacific, Europe, and then probably one in the US. So this is sort of your general. If you've ever played an MMO, super massive world in terms of gameplay size. This is one region. So this is Bosco Valley. This is where we'll basically be starting our adventure. There are 8 other regions. Basically, if you've seen the map that you can see up on our website, got 8 elemental regions plus Primus, which is the sort of main city region. In terms of map size, you can take a look. It's pretty huge. So this map, I think this map is roughly equivalent of like 10 square kilometers. So it's a pretty big world. Lots of exploration to do. I think I've shown some videos of this before, but there's all kinds of stuff you can do to participate in sort of interact with things in the world. So you'll notice down here that this fishing pool basically gives me the ability to fish out of it. So we use what's called an interaction system. So when you get close to something that you can interact with, your buttons change, and you can kind of interact with different things in the world, collect resources. In this case, I caught a fish, and it was a moss head. So there was a question, basically, that was posed to, I think I think it was Telegram. Sort of how do you find resources in the world? It's really sort of an open world concept where basically you have to go and find them, and they're out in the wild. We use this sparkle effect in most cases in order to sort of show that there's something you can interact with. It's not always the case. You can interact with things potentially that don't sparkle, but a lot of like the farming and gathering actions basically use this sort of indicator. So in this case, I'm using mining. So in this case, mining an oak stump. And so this is basically how resources are gathered in the game. You can collect them. I think there's another one over here. It looks like this server is our test server is basically got a pretty quick respawn rate. So I think the resources are respawning every 60 seconds. But in the future, the resource respawn rate will be sort of more limited. So that way, things like you'll actually have to go out and farm materials and things like that in order to craft things. So if you've played Genesis, you'll also notice we have an inventory system. So all those items that I just collected show up in my inventory. So I've got my fish, I've got my bramble nut, and my oak heart. And so those items are basically be used for crafting. You'll be able to craft different types of foods, items, things to take care of your Cryptomon, battle consumables, all the different things that you would expect from your typical MMO. There was a question also, I think, on stream. On stream, I guess somebody sent it to me. Will there be any level requirements or requirements for? Yeah, there we got Drew. We're going with the Lost Boys look today, I guess. I can get behind this. Basically, in one of my staff meetings, basically everyone decided to remove their equipment, and we called it the Lost Boys. So this is the new way that we roll. So we'll run with it. So someone asked about rank and level requirements. We're still working through those mechanics. There's sort of two things that are sort of on the table when it comes to sort of progression. One is that your Cryptomon leveling will be tied specific to a game. So if you are level 50 in Genesis, that won't have any bearing on your progression in Walk. Or the other option is basically your levels carry over, and then you would sort of have the progression carried over. There's pros and cons to both. As I mentioned, this is like one of the first times anyone's ever trying to do multiple games in a franchise with NFTs that carry over. Most of your MMOs, when you play like the version 1 and then they drop a new version, you start all over and your character's not even the same, let alone including your assets and the items and things that you collected. So this is sort of, we're kind of blazing a new path here. So we're still working through some of the balance mechanics. But that's something we'll sort of provide some more information on in the future. Obviously, there's also concerns with if you bring new players on and they're not level 50, how do they explore the ecosystem, that type of stuff. So we're trying to keep a good balance, a healthy way to onboard new players, because obviously we want new players, and then also sort of rewarding existing players for their progression. And I also mentioned your armor will be able to carry over and things like that. So you'll be able to wear those assets, which is obviously a huge plus when you start coming out to play in Walk. So even if the levels don't carry over, then it will be something that we can sort of you'll sort of get that progression already. So I think we mentioned that we're going to be hosting a community preview event. That will be coming up hopefully in the next month or so, so you should hear information about signing up for it. Trainers Club members will automatically be able to whitelist for it, and then everyone else will have some campaigns and some events that will allow you to kind of whitelist and register for it. The purpose of these community previews, I didn't give too much detail, but they're really sort of twofold. One is for us to get some players exposed to the game, get some feedback, but also sort of test core mechanics. So if you've ever played any MMO, they are massive. So this game, we've been working on this for about a year, and we've basically built most of the underlying frameworks that the game uses. So we have what we, as you saw, like an interaction system. We also have a quest system, inventory rewards, that type of stuff. So really what we're trying to start testing in these previews is putting all of that stuff together. So this first community preview is going to basically be focused on questing. So right now there's a test quest line in the game where you basically will be, as part of the preview, in order to earn your rewards, which we'll talk about a little bit later, you'll basically run through and play through the quest line. Once you complete the quest line, at the end of the preview, we'll ask you for some feedback, anything that worked, didn't work, bugs, that type of stuff. And then if you can finish the feedback and also finish the quest line, you'll be dropped sort of some rewards for participating. And those rewards will sort of accumulate over the course of the tech previews. And then the goal is basically to allow you to take those rewards and use them to craft things in our crafting system that are super unique and rare for the launch of the game. As I mentioned, we have a bunch of different systems, including our quest system. So in this case, you'll notice I just found the Wandering Explorer, which is part of this quest line. If I go into my actual quest, so I have a quest log. So the game's got pretty decent progression in terms of systems and frameworks. In this case, the quest was entering Bosco Valley, come into it, search, find clues about the region, find the Wandering Explorer, and win some rewards. You'll notice that we've got item rewards. We've also got reputation rewards. So as I mentioned, it's a full-featured MMO. So we've got a full faction reputation system. So if I go in here and I go to my faction tab, there's a whole bunch of different factions. And for those of you that don't know, it's kind of like guilds, but it's a little bit different. Basically, there are people and groups of people that you can do quests for, or give them things, and you earn sort of favor with them. And as you get through certain levels of favor, they open up rewards or they open up quests and other types of things that you can earn. Obviously, you get to the highest levels of reputation, and you get things like high-level armor or high-level materials that you can use to craft different things. So the game uses sort of a faction system to help promote progression as you finish the quests. In this case, I'm going to I've finished all of the requirements and objectives, click complete, and I'll basically have completed the quest. You'll notice I got 200 rep, got some items, and now my rep has gone up. So the game is, if you've played MMOs, it's got sort of your standard set of features, a lot of sort of unique things tied in, like I mentioned. Elements will play a role. So as you see here right now, I only have one Cryptomon active. You can only have one Cryptomon active at any given point. So if I were to go in here and essentially go to switch, you'd notice that my active Cryptomon becomes Archimedes. These systems will change a little bit, and we'll talk about the battle mechanics, but you will only ever have one Cryptomon active. When you go to perform interactions or gather things, there's checks to basically see what type of element you have active. So, for example, I think back here there is an energy vortex somewhere. Take a look. I think it's up the hill on the right. So, I think I had mentioned before about the Aura utility. So, Aura Cryptomon obviously are a unique Cryptomon, super rare. There's only, I think, 4,000 of them or so. You can see this green swirly thing over here. These are energy vortexes. So, energy sort of leaks out of the world based on where what element of the region that you're in. So in this case, we're in the grass region. So this vortex is essentially leaking grass energy. Can extract the energy. The Aura Cryptomon essentially. I guess I don't have that hooked up to actually give items right now. But if you had, for example, a grass Aura Cryptomon, you'd get double the amount of materials for it. Otherwise, you just get the sort of grass energy. Everything in the game sort of revolves around the concept of energy and essence. So I think in my quest, I don't think I earned any yet. There's basically energy essence that's used in crafting. There's different tiers of it. So there's sort of your lowest level essence. Then you've got some greater essences, some helix essences, and all of them are used in the crafting system and other types of game mechanics. So you'll be able to collect those out in the world and then use them while you're playing. Let's see. Take a look at my list. All right. Why don't we pause it there, and I'm going to swap back to. I'm going to swap screens. Let's talk a little bit about the battle mechanics. So there's been a lot of questions, I think, about the battle mechanics, and I think that this is probably, if I had to guess, the biggest spoiler that we'll be dropping during stream. Oops. Let's see. Battle. Here we go. All right. So this is the battle scene. The way that Cryptomon battles work today in Genesis is everything is turn-based. And so I'm a huge fan of strategy games. Obviously, that's why Genesis was sort of designed the way that it was. I like the fact that there's a lot of sort of chess-like mechanics to it. However, when you're building an open-world game, in my experience, the turn-based mechanics just don't do the game justice. There's just not enough depth of gameplay. It's not super engaging, and everything sort of feels very scripted. And so, as part of World of Kojia, we are essentially taking the Genesis battle engine and converting it into real-time combat. So, as you're running around the world, you'll notice in the bottom corner here, you'll have essentially all of your spells equipped. The spells will be pretty much the same spells from Genesis, so you'll be familiar with them if you've played any of our other games. There'll be a few twists and turns and a couple of tweaks here and there, but you'll essentially have access to cast your spells in real time. The engine will have what's called a global cooldown, so you won't be able to spam, for example, physical attack over and over again. There'll be sort of a few second cooldown on your spell. On spell casts, and then you'll also some of your spells themselves will have cooldowns. So we're still obviously working through. We actually just started development on the battle engine, so we won't see any of that gameplay here, and that'll be something that we sort of cover in future firesides. But you'll basically be able to cast your spells in real time if you've ever played World of Warcraft or anything like that. You can kind of think of the mechanics similar to playing Hunter. The Hunter class, which is really like a pet-based class. But there's a couple of nuances. Obviously, you don't have a bow and you're not shooting at the creatures themselves. Realistically, Cryptomon and all the enemies in the world are too powerful for you as a trainer to even sort of deal with. And so you rely on your Cryptomon to protect you and battle for you. If at any point your active team, you'll notice here that right now, and some of this stuff is obviously early in design, but the plan is for you to have three Cryptomon in your team, just like you do today. So you'll notice in the top left, you've got two sort of profile images of smaller Cryptomon. Those are the equivalent of your bench Cryptomon today, and you'll basically be able to click on them to swap them. Obviously, depending on the cooldown, there'll be a cooldown on swaps. And you'll essentially be able to kind of play a little bit like Genesis, but it'll be real-time combat. So you'll be casting your spells. It uses the same energy charge system, so your physical spells will still generate charges. They'll probably generate a smaller amount of charges and do less damage. So obviously, we're going to be doing some unique balancing and some changes to the spell mechanics in order to support real-time combat. But you'll basically be using your physical spells and your shields and other things to generate charges, and then use your regular spells for casting elemental spells and things like that. You'll notice some buttons along the bottom. The bottom left button you'll notice is your typical run, so that's already what you see sort of in the gameplay that I had shown. You've got your jump button, same as what you saw here. And then there's two new buttons here for combat. The first is a whistle, which right now it's only planned to be used in combat, but we actually may add this to more open world play and to some puzzle mechanics that we've been looking at. The whistle basically forces your Cryptomon to follow you. So as you saw in the gameplay, your Cryptomon's sort of following you around, but once combat starts, whoever they're targeting is essentially who they follow. The moment I click physical attack, the spells have a specific range of casts, so they have to be 10 meters away or 2 meters away from your target. The Cryptomon will essentially move to that target and then cast the spell. The whistle allows you to essentially pull them back. So one of the other cool things about doing real-time gameplay is we get to build sort of encounters. So if you've ever played any type of RPG or anything like that, you know that like boss mechanics and other sort of large creature mechanics are kind of a cool way to experience different types of gameplay. So you can imagine you're fighting a boss or you're fighting a world boss or something, and that boss decides to cast some massive AoE spell that has a specific range. You could pull your Cryptomon back with the whistle. They would follow you back to you. They would get to safety. The boss would cast a spell. Then you'd be able to go back and start attacking. There's also other mechanics. For example, if you maybe the boss does a lot of sort of AoE damage constantly when you're standing near it, so you would basically go in, get your charges, pull your Cryptomon back, and then cast ranged spells like Fireball and things like that. So that's sort of the gameplay mechanic. Is you as a trainer control your position, and then you use your whistle to essentially control where your Cryptomon goes and when they go there. And then the bottom right hand corner is our targeting system. So as you can see in the video, in the picture, there's sort of 3 wild Cryptomon on the screen. You've got your main target, which has the red circle underneath it, and it shows up on the target profile at the top in the middle. That's essentially who your Cryptomon is actively targeting and attacking. So if you were to cast physical attack, that's who it would attack. If you cast a fireball, that's where it would go. The other creatures that are enemies you'll be able to use that targeting system to swap to them. So you can think of it almost like a toggle. So you push the target button, and it'll basically swap between the targeted any of the enemies in the area. So you'll basically be able to, like, let's say you're working on a Cryptomon, you're fighting an enemy, you cast Hydra, you know that the Hydra is going to kill that Cryptomon or that enemy. You swap the target and you start killing the other target. So there's a lot of sort of depth of gameplay that it really brings a lot to the table, which is why we ended up moving towards an open world combat mechanic. Obviously, all of us sort of come from that Pokemon world, and we sort of have this nostalgia around turn-based play. I love the old Final Fantasy turn-based play games. From my perspective, I think we were going to do ourselves a little bit of a disservice using turn-based mechanics, especially in a game so massive and that has so much potential. The goal here is really to compete with sort of the huge games that everyone's playing nowadays. If you look at all the top games, they all have real-time combat. You've got Fortnite, League of Legends, that type of stuff. All of those games, part of their fun comes from sort of a lot going on and having to respond to what's going on and expressing your skill as a player by knowing what's going on. So this really sort of changes the mechanics of where we're headed from a gameplay perspective. And so we were hesitant to announce it up until now. I don't think really anyone, except for maybe a handful of people, knew that it was coming. Like I said, its development just started on it, so we don't have any videos on it. But we figured we'd run through it, get some feedback since we're in the process of building, see what you guys like, see what you don't like, and sort of work from there. Some other cool things that are coming as part of the battle mechanics, like I mentioned, are AoE spells, so area of effect. So right now we have a set of spells called group spells in Genesis that will be coming out as part of the next round of spells. Those spells are sort of like a turn-based equivalent of AoE. In World of Kojia, in the battle system, there will be spells that essentially have the ability to do area of effects, and so maybe it's damage to anything within 10 meters of where your target. There's also mechanics where the area of effect can be on your Cryptomon or the target Cryptomon. So you can imagine, like, you cast a fireball at a target and it explodes and does a small amount of splash damage to everything in the area. But you also have a mechanic where, let's say you have a grass Cryptomon and you call it back to you and all of your party's standing there and you cast an AoE heal and you can heal your entire party that's within that range. So the system The system is really designed to create a huge depth of gameplay. As I mentioned, we'll be carrying over the base spells, but there'll be other spells that come in as part of the mechanics. The battle engine uses an aggro system, so not sure if folks are familiar with that, but an aggro system basically keeps track of the threat levels for determining who the enemy should target. So, for example, let's say you're fighting a boss and you want to have one Cryptomon act as a tank. There'll be spells that basically increase your threat against that target so that they keep targeting you while your friends can basically target them and attack them. And so we're sort of merging and mixing a lot of cool concepts from different games. So the typical RPG tank, healer, direct damage components. Obviously, Cryptomon have some cool features because they have multiple elements, and so they get the ability to potentially do a little bit of both. But also bringing in that kind of pet-based combat that we know and love from sort of the Pokemon and other turn-based games. So there's a lot there in terms of gameplay. Obviously, we'll talk more about it as it comes up. But that sort of at a super high level is sort of where we're headed from a gameplay perspective. I think we've talked a lot about it internally. Building a system like this is no easy manner. It would be way easier to build a turn-based mechanic. There's a lot less challenges when it comes to networking and synchronization and latency and things like that. But we feel like we'd be doing us a disservice if we didn't sort of take the opportunity to really bring the gameplay to the next level. So now that I covered sort of that at a high level, let's take a look at some of the questions in chat. Are all of the food actually? While we're doing that, I'll swap back over to the gameplay. That way we can just see what's going on. Oh, Drew's still hanging out with me here. It looks like someone else is here too. Oh, he's running away. Just to kind of show you the aggro mechanic in play. So we've been kind of play testing and playing around with aggro. The idea is that creatures will have sort of an aggro range. So in this case, I'm going to go near this Cryptomon. He's going to start to come after me. You'll be able to run away. They'll have a tether section. Obviously, we'll sort of play around with the balance, how far the person can run away. You don't want to always be able to run away from battles. They will also cast spells when you're and attack you. So even if you're running away, they'll still be hitting your Cryptomon. But it'll sort of be one of those mechanics where basically you're running around and you have to kind of figure out who's going to attack you, what you're going to attack, that type of stuff. There are some questions about the food coming over. So as of right now, a lot of the in-game items that we use in Genesis are most likely not going to be carried over. Things like Tamagotchi food and other things like that. We are looking at some mechanics to have some of those sort of carry between games. We've talked about, so if anyone's familiar with the lore, obviously you know that Kojia is basically a place that you access through Pink Moon events and through portals that sort of bridge the two worlds. And so the idea is that we might allow players to bring a small amount of Earth-based items, which is what we kind of consider the Genesis items, over into the game on a periodic basis. But there'll be a whole new set of items, whole new set of craftables. There's a lot of stuff related to the elements, so when you craft things, it'll take into account what element base it is, and you'll get different items out of it. You'll be able to craft different types of food that maybe increase your electro damage, for example, for a period of time after you eat it. Things like that. The crafting system is pretty expanded. We're going to kind of build a hybrid. So there was a set of questions about NFTs and currency in the new game. So we're still working through the technical details, but the general concept is that we're going to try and make the game as seamless as possible. So when you go and you finish a quest, for example, there's going to be a set of rewards. You as a player are not going to necessarily know which ones are NFTs and which ones aren't NFTs. Some of them will be in-game items, some of them will be NFTs, and when you actually finish the quest, our back-end services will essentially send you and mint the items in real time, essentially similar to what happens today, except I think we do airdrops. So the idea is we're gonna work on sort of a more real time system. So you craft an item in World of Kojia. Maybe some of them are in-game item materials, some of them are NFTs, and then you get an NFT back, and the game will sort of be relatively seamless. In terms of sort of how the economics and things like that work, we're still working through some different options. There's a couple of ideas on the table in terms of other currencies. Obviously, Kmon is meant to be our primary currency, so it will always sort of use that as our primary currency. But we've talked about creating a deposit system where basically you can deposit Kmon into the game into almost like a virtual currency that you can use in game, or potentially also having our own blockchain. So we've talked a little bit about that. That would allow us to reduce or completely eliminate gas fees and allow us to really sort of scale the mechanics of the game. I think a lot of that stuff is sort of being worked on in the background, and we're trying to find the right mix of blockchain tech and regular Web 2 technology approaches in order to sort of make the best experience for the player. So if you look back at pretty much every single time you hear myself or like Umberto talk about how we approach game design and the use of Web3 technologies, we really focus on like what adds value to the player and to the ecosystem. And so we're not going to just make everything an NFT and have thousands of dollars of gas fees for no reason. So we're really going to kind of focus on finding that healthy balance. I will also say that the plan in World of Kojia is for players to be able to buy and sell in-game items. I know that there's been questions about that in Genesis. So essentially, you'll be able to sort of, for example, farm oak hearts and then trade them with players or sell them to players on our in-game auction house. The breakdown between assets between NFTs and in-game items is going to get a little bit blurry, but the real goal for the use of NFTs is going to be sort of like very big, unique items, things that would be something that would be considered an asset versus more of the materials. I know today we use the armor scraps as materials, and those are NFTs. They're technically like ERC20 like NFTs, but they're NFTs nonetheless. The goal is really to, like I said, find the right balance. You can see over here there's a ground Cryptomon. So we've got a lot of different sort of models for our game. It looks like Drew Candy's back. And then, so I think I really answered the question about like the NFTs and currency. Covered some of the combat stuff. There was another question about sort of how Genesis exists, and I just saw it in chat too, how to keep Cryptomons from freezing in Kojia without playing Genesis. So there's a lot, as we sort of grow and expand. It looks like we got another player over here. I don't know who this is. Oh, it's Perry. So as we grow and expand and really sort of explore the franchise concept, it becomes obviously there's some challenges we need to address. So one of those challenges is your Cryptomon's health and hunger and happiness stats. So we are working on some plans to essentially create almost like a centralized service for those things. So that way, for example, when you feed your Cryptomon food in World of Kojia, it's using the same back-end data that you'll use in Genesis, so you could play either one and your Cryptomon would stay unfrozen across the entire ecosystem. So that's sort of the goal. We're not really there yet, but it's something we're actively working towards. Obviously, when you start building a large franchise like this with NFTs carrying across the ecosystem, you have to solve some of these problems. So the plan is for us to have sort of this centralized service for tracking Cryptomon information. We'll probably would end up using it for training if training carried over between the games also. So that's sort of what we're looking to do, is expand the ecosystem so that it's really a truly living NFT. And you'll be able to sort of play with the Cryptomon wherever you want and sort of keep that sort of continuity and progression. There was a question about new models. So as of right now, we're mostly working on bringing the current models into game. Obviously, we're going to end up supporting... Perry's back. We're going to end up supporting adult Cryptomon too, so we'll see adult Cryptomon for the first time in World of Kojia. A little bit of a spoiler, adult Cryptomon will be able to be used as mounts, assuming that you find or craft the appropriate NFTs for doing that. So we will have sort of a mount-based system where you can ride on your Cryptomon. It'll use some of the genome stats in order to determine sort of how fast they move and things like that. So we're going to be taking that concept of the genomes and continuing to expand it into the ecosystem. So we don't have a full set of plans for new Cryptomon models. I'm never going to say never. There are some challenges on the way that the genomes are on the blockchain for us. If we were to try and add slightly different models or new body parts or things like that, it would potentially impact the older ones unless we updated the contract. So that is on the table, something that's been discussed, but there's no current plans for it. Also, as you know, most MMORPGs have expansion packs, so I would never rule out additional Cryptomon models or potentially even new elements in the future. One of the nice things about sort of building games this way is you kind of see where the thing takes you. So you throw some stuff out there, see what players enjoy playing, and then sort of move on to kind of add some new features and functionality. See what else, if we had any other questions on here. It would be cool just to roam around Kojia to flex our Cryptomon. I think there was some questions about whether the battle system will be in the community night. So the battle system definitely won't be in the community night. I'm actually playing, like, this version is pretty close to what you're going to see on the community night. So the first version is really focused on quests and testing the quests. Like I said, we'll have additional community tech previews in our community preview series as we go. The next one will most likely be on Gathering. It looks like Perry found a bug where he can stand on my Cryptomon, but we'll have to take a look at that. The next one will probably be on like Gathering, so things like mining, picking up plants, and different things off the ground, and also fishing. We also, I didn't think I had mentioned, we also have an achievement system. So this will be a very cool way for people to flex their completion of the game. There'll be basically a series of achievements, different types of achievements, things for exploration, being able to find all the different regions and unlock them in the specific map. You'll also see here that you can earn rewards. So some of these rewards could be cool, unique NFTs. Something like basically a fishing achievement where you can earn a cool fishing bucket hat or something like this. Right now, I'm not playing on a cell phone right now. I'm playing on the PC just because it's easier to stream. But most of the people that have early access will let you know that there's really no difference between the PC and the mobile version, which is pretty good. You guys will take a look at it when you get it, but in general, we've done a really good job sort of optimizing the gameplay. We still have some work to do. Obviously, it's a continuous activity, but there are some very unique things in World of Kojia's design that not every game has access to. So you don't typically build MMOs as your first game simply because they are very complicated and there's a lot of challenges with them. Looks like Blaze, looks like Axel hopped in too. You don't see, like I said, a lot of game studios building MMORPGs because they're very complicated. We have a very unique and proprietary system that I've built that essentially allows us to break our world up into small pieces. So you are not really playing an MMO when you're playing a small portion of the MMO. And so it allows us to do a lot with the number of players on the server without affecting performance. Part of the reason for you doing these community preview series is also to test that. So our goal as a dev team, which is pretty crazy, is to support 20,000 concurrent players per server, which is a lot. So if you've ever played a game, even like 5,000 players, I think World of Warcraft had like a max of 5,000 players per server. The 20,000 is something that we think we can hit, but we'll sort of test it and see as we go. Let's take a look and see if there are any other questions in chat. I know that we're coming up towards the end of the time. Will items gain in the beta transfer release? No. So when you're playing on the community previews, you're really just playing what we consider a tech preview. They're not even an alpha or a beta. So when we run, when we actually get to the point where we have sort of a close to finished, polished game, we'll run through our typical flow of releasing an alpha version where players can basically come in and play early. And then we'll have obviously the closed beta that we always do for the Trainers Club. And then the game will essentially launch and go live at that point. It still remains to be seen on whether or not we'll let players keep their items from the beta. All of the tech previews and the alpha and everything, none of the items will get carried over. We'll essentially be wiping production database every time we do a release. Matt's asked a question, can free-to-players enter Kojia? Yeah, so as part of the community preview series, if you are a free-to-play player, if you have a Trainers Club badge, obviously you can automatically whitelist. But you'll be wanting to look out for some information on our socials about some contests we're going to run to get players access. So you'll be able to do some stuff. I think we might run like a Gleam type campaign to get spots opened up for players. But your free-to-play Cryptomon will actually show up in game. So pretty much any junior Cryptomon you have in your wallet, whether it's free-to-play or an NFT, will show up. And then, like I said, if you get access, free to play, we'll be able to play. I think if you don't have any Cryptomon on your account, we generate 3 for you just so you have something to play around with. That, I think, answers the question about the free to play. If we have 10 Cryptomon, can we use it or change our Cryptomon anytime? So I think I covered this a little bit. So you're going to have essentially almost like a stable system. We haven't built it in game. So right now you have access to all of your Cryptomon. But essentially, you'll have up to like a certain number of slots that you can use to bring out into the world, and then inside of the main cities, there'll be a way for like a stable master or something that you'll be able to go and sort of grab your other Cryptomon and make changes to your team. And so you won't have access to your entire repertoire of Cryptomon. Also, like I mentioned, you're only going to be able to use 3 in combat at a time, at most 3. We'll obviously do some work on balancing that, but you'll basically be able to come in and pick your Cryptomon. I think this screen has changed in the combat builds. There's basically 3 buttons down at the bottom. One that the 1, 2, and 3, and that's how you can set your battle slots. Also, you'll set your spells ahead of time. So I didn't show this earlier. This is still a work in progress. As you can tell, some of the localization and stuff isn't working. But you'll basically be able to set your spells ahead of time, and that is what will essentially show up on your spell bar when combat starts in the bottom right-hand corner, as we saw in the preview scene. Is it possible to have a feature where we build a community village? You can have a down. So we are still working through there were actually a bunch of questions on lands, and I don't want to not cover lands, but lands in particular are essentially still under design. Our original plan was to do, I think it was like roughly 6,000 plots of land in the game. And the plot of land would essentially allow you to put a building on it, whether it was like a commercial building or a residential building. You could own a shop, depending on the zoning of the land. One of the things we like to do at Cryptomon is really take real world concepts and bring them into kind of like this virtual world. And so we came up with the concept of zoning of land plots. So you'll have residential plots that you can only put player housing on, and then there'll be commercial or mixed use that will allow you to also put buildings on. So I think we've talked in previous streams about things like Cryptomon trainer facilities. I forget what we call them. They're basically facilities where you can essentially train your Cryptomon's elements or extract energy, things like that. Those are considered commercial buildings, so are shops, that type of stuff. Oh, we got a lot of people. Looks like I need to tweak that portal mechanic somehow. Don't mind everyone else with the super speed. So as part of the dev build, we basically have a way to get around the entire map. The map is huge. We've covered this tiny sliver from where I started walking all the way down here, and you can see here, obviously, the map has a lot of sections to it. So we call each of these sort of subregions. Each subregion has its own sort of style and theme, storyline. I think I've mentioned it before, but we also plan on having a very large number of quests. So there was a question about whether World of Kojia will just be quest based or whether there will be PvP. So that's probably one of the main. That's sort of going to be something that changes over time. Genesis, as it stands right now, is meant to be sort of your gameplay mechanic for sort of like tournaments and Battle League. We'll be releasing those as the development is finished on them. Those will continue to run in Genesis. So if you want to play tournaments, you'll be able to play with your Cryptomon in Genesis, playing tournaments, Battle League. In terms of World of Kojia PvP, we are going to take sort of an iterative approach. Initially, most likely at launch, there's going to be open world PvP. So certain regions in each, certain subregions in each of the regions will be dedicated to PvP, and they'll basically be a set of quests or resources that players will need to gather in order to essentially complete quests or earn materials and things in order to craft PvP gear. So in addition to the PvP gear from Genesis, we'll probably add a couple of sets of PvP gear. And then you'll basically be able to go into those regions. When you're in that region, anyone who is not in your party will be open game, and you'll be able to essentially attack their Cryptomon. If you kill all three of their Cryptomon, they'll basically die, and then they'll spawn off on a new location. So I didn't really mention that before, but if all three of your Cryptomon die, you essentially will respawn. I think it's right now it's planned to be the nearest inn that you're near. So inside of the cities, the towns, there are inns that basically allow you to regenerate and respawn there. So that is basically how the mechanic works. Obviously, in between battles, you'll be able to use items in order to kind of regenerate health that you've crafted for your Cryptomon. But if you are stuck in combat and all three of your Cryptomon die, you will essentially die as a player because obviously you can't survive in the world just walking around without a Cryptomon to protect you. And so you'll respawn at the nearest inn. Another question, it looks like, hope there will be a big boss where we can kill a quest monster boss and other stuff. So, obviously, the open world combat changes a lot of different mechanics. We already talked about the party system. The plan is for the party system to also carry forward into a dungeon system. So the idea is that you would basically be able to queue up with a group of friends to play dungeons. And you would essentially queue up to a dungeon, you'd be transported to that dungeon's map, and you'd play through it, and the idea is that we would build boss encounters and other types of things, kind of as a way to farm equipment and gear and other items. So that's sort of the general plan for in terms of like boss mechanics. We also have talked about world boss encounters. So one of the nice things, or the things that we're trying to accomplish with that system I talked about earlier for splitting the world up, is being able to support a lot of players. So it'd be pretty cool to have a giant sort of ancient Cryptomon or sort of evil creature that spawns that you can go and group up with everyone on the server to go kill and earn some items. From experience, I can tell you those are really hard to build in terms of making it work with like 1,000 players in the same space. So it's something we'll keep an eye on. Obviously, it's we're going to expand the game and build as we go. The idea is to kind of build a baseline MMORPG that people can play and that is fun and has some gameplay mechanics, and then we'll continue expanding on it as we go. In terms of the future of PvP, I think we'll sort of take a look at how the mechanics play out in terms of open world PvP. If the gameplay is good, I could see adding a system for death matches or battlegrounds, which would be like 10v10 or 20v20 players, capture the flag, that type of stuff. So the open world combat really opens up a lot of options, and I have obviously a lot of experience in the PvP space, so got some stuff up my sleeve that I'd like to sort of explore, and we'll see how that goes. Looks like Pinkman asked, will there be health centers in Pokemon? I think that's one of the things we're still working through. I'm half tempted to have a mechanic where basically once your 3 Cryptomon get low, that the only way to restore their health is to go back to a city or a town to go to like a health center. I think that that would be a cool mechanic and play off of like you really need to not take a lot of damage and not be and really sort of understand how you're doing combat versus just kind of mashing buttons and healing in between battles. A lot of that stuff will come out of like the balancing. So you may have to go back to a city or a town in order to find a place to basically restore your Cryptomon's battle health. Um, Obviously, your Tamagotchi stats will work the same way that they do now. They'll go down over time. I don't think the health will drop when you battle. Obviously, as we work through the combat system, we'll sort of figure some of that stuff out. But you will have like in-game health, kind of like you do in Genesis, like battle health, and that will not regenerate when you're out of combat. So we'll sort of work through the different mechanics as the combat system goes sort of live. Will the diamond badge? Oh, this is a non World of Kojia question. Obviously, we're getting close to the end of time. Any preview for combat? I think I mentioned earlier that the combat system's under development. As soon as I have some previews, I'm sure you guys will see it. Obviously, if you don't have a Trainers Club badge, I highly recommend anyone pick them up. They give you early access to information and spoilers and stuff, and also potentially with early drops. As we start doing more and more sort of unique drops, even in Genesis with like cosmetics, we will most likely be using the Trainers Club badges for like early access and early drops and things like that. Perry asked about the diamond badge boosting silver boxes. So we did change the way that the hunter passes. So this is for the Pink Moon app. The hunter passes do now carry the weight of the lower passes. So if you have a diamond badge, you get all of the perks of the gold and silver and platinum badges. The caveat is it's not exactly the same as just sort of increasing it, because obviously you can't increase the drop rate of gold boxes and not impact the drop rate of other things. So they are all expanded, so you do have a much higher chance of getting gold boxes with a diamond badge, but it's not quite the same level as the as like if you just had like a platinum badge, just because the platinum badge doesn't have an increase in NFT drops. 101 FPS. Yeah, I'm actually running on PC, so it's really just based on my PC, and I have a pretty powerful PC, so I can run like 8 instances of the game dev platform itself. On mobile, we're targeting like 30 FPS. Obviously, the game is not your typical sort of just casual game. So having higher end devices is important. We do have a concept of settings changes. So the game, when you first load, will look at the device profile that you have and set the settings for performance accordingly. But you can come in and toggle it. So if you're on an older device and when it loads up, you're not really getting sort of the FPS you want, you can go down to different quality levels, and so it'll scale down. You can kind of see it gets a little blurry. But this is pretty standard in terms of like mobile MMORPG development. You can go through the different tiers, and then obviously Ultra is the highest. We are working on improving that even. There'll be different performance levels for PC and mobile, obviously. In PC, eventually we'll have more real-time lighting and shadows, higher quality textures and things like that. What if a player has a healer, Cryptomon, where you can heal yours, but you need to pay the owner to loot your heals? I think we'll sort of work through the mechanics of healing and stuff like that. Obviously, Grass Cryptomon, all the Cryptomon will maintain their sort of general approach to their archetype in combat. So Grass will be for healing, Ice will be for sort of increasing resistance. Obviously, the group spells that are coming will impact your party members. So, like, if you have an Electro Cryptomon, you'll be able to buff the Electro damage of everyone in your party if they were near you. So we could be bursting a boss and need a little bit of DPS boost, and you can kind of bring one Electro Cryptomon maybe, and also a Water Cryptomon, and then the buff stack. And there's a lot of cool gameplay mechanics and group mechanics once you sort of look at that. In terms of the dungeon mechanics, we may only let you play with one Cryptomon, so like it'll be like 4 or 5 players each with one Cryptomon instead of 3. But yeah, so that's I think we've pretty much run out of time. I'm just going to take one last check and see if there's any other questions that I missed. We'll obviously release more info about land in the future. But but the idea is that players will be able to buy land and own it, and potentially group areas together. And I think that's sort of all we had queued up. Like I mentioned, obviously keep an eye out on our socials if you don't have a Trainers Club badge. That way you can take part in the campaign to get access to the community preview. I think the last sort of little bit of spoiler is I think there's been some folks asking questions. I teased a little bit in the Trainers Club, but I'll leave you with this. So many of you have maybe seen an icon floating around. The icons are actually the native currency of the community preview series. So they're called Pink Moon Shards, and as part of the events, you'll collect them. And then those will be what you use essentially to craft the unique cosmetics or armor or items that come with the launch of the community preview series. They will be tradable, so they will not be bound. So players will be able to earn them, stack them, and obviously collect them. This first one we're going to basically do is sort of a flat rate reward system. So you finish the quest, you fill out the feedback, and you get your reward. In the future, we may start playing around with competition stuff. I really like the stuff that Bored Ape Yacht Club did with Sewer Pass, where they kind of created leaderboards. So maybe in the future we have one where basically maybe the crafting one, for example, is the person that gathers the most of a specific item gets additional Pink Moon Shards added to their rewards at the end. So that is the last little bit of spoiler that I will leave you with. Been fun. Hope everyone really enjoyed watching the game on stream. I'm looking forward, and all the dev team's really looking forward for folks to kind of see what we've been working on. Obviously, you can tell we've been working pretty hard. A world in a game like this doesn't come together quickly, but in my opinion, it's well worth the wait, and we'll get some folks in and sort of keep pushing forward, and obviously bringing more to Genesis and to other games in the franchise. So everyone else, have a good day, and I'm out.